And Mark Turner was really the Deus Ex Machina who started this whole operation some 3 years ago. So I'd like to ask him to make some closing remarks. I'm not asking you to synthesize all of this, just to make some closing remarks for us. Thank you very much.
There are certain cultural forms. For 2.5 millennia, we have recognized poets as the great summative voice, not in analysis, but in detection of where our attention should be directed. We've talked about time, self, memory, identity, the body, communication. Once out of nature, I shall never take my bodily form from any natural thing, but such a form as Grecian goldsmiths make of hammered gold and gold enameling to keep a drowsy emperor awake, or set upon a bough to sing to lords and ladies of Byzantium of what is past or passing or to come. Or another avatar of personal identity and memory. That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves are none, or few do hang upon those boughs that shake against the cold, bare, ruined choirs, where late the sweet bird sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self, which seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed, whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well, which thou must leave ere long. Now, this is not analysis, but this poses us a set of distinctions which we must explain, because this is what moves us, this is what constitutes our identity, this is what has force. I'd like to read you one, my sort of standard kind of riff. Fabulous cognitive performance, which we have no difficulty understanding because we are cognitively modern human beings. This is from Ian MacDonald's Emily's Diary, November 5th, 1913, in King of the Morning, Queen of the Day, pages 82 to 83. Remarkable! When I am sitting on a cushion on the floor, busy with scissors and glue pot, the time just vanishes. Before I know it, the latticed rectangle of pale autumn sunlight has moved from the left wall across the floor to the other wall, and Mrs. O'Carolan is calling me for supper. Perhaps time is flowing faster up there in the attic. Perhaps the accumulated mass of the past gathered there is pulling time out of the future faster, like weight on a line. Or perhaps more mundanely, it is only that I'm getting older every year, and that it is the accumulated weight of time behind me that is unreeling the years with ever-increasing speed. What a horrible thing it must be to grow older and find that ever-decreasing number of years hurrying you faster, faster toward your grave, as if it were impatient to be rid of you. Now, no one has any trouble understanding these sorts of expressions. And this is the great challenge set in front of us. Time, memory, self, space, body. We are in the analytic mode here, trying to come up with some fundamentals for getting a grip on what cognitively modern human beings, even those with no formation in the study of the human mind, have no difficulty understanding. So what have we done? Well, for starters, let me say that one of the things that we need to acknowledge is there have been many, many participants here. For starters, we're just a few people, and things must survive in memory. We have a few little memories here, but our memories are frail. And if we don't have some social and cultural and technological method of projecting this so that it can survive in the future and impinge upon the consciousness of others, then our little memories will be a kind of backwater. The people in the back of the room come from Media Vision. They are sent here by Mike Cubitt. Their job is to record, tag, and project what has happened here. It's going to be on tv.case.edu. It will be searchable. It will be permanent. What does it mean to have a kind of external memory that projects to the world that can constitute our identity? So for example, you're all a little anxious right now because you're going to be out there. You're going to have a digital footprint, and once there's a digital footprint out there, it never goes away. It's like YouTube, only this is CaseTube, and you're going to be in it. What does this do to your sense of self, technology, identity, narrative? In any event, let us thank the people in the back of the room who are going to magnify our self, our narrative, and our memory to the world. This is important in a cognitive science scientific question. Let us thank our seniors. Merlin Donald, old dogs can't learn new tricks. He has proved he is not an old dog, because let me tell you, moving from where he came at Queens to here is like moving into another galaxy. He is the one who has founded this department. He is the one who's put this conference together. He didn't have to do it. He could have retired to Toronto and written prose. And thank you to Thais for supporting him in this great challenge. Thank you to Professor Benson, who has come here to stimulate all of us with a truly an adventurous and spectacular colloquium of the sort that is really, really daring. And that is, of course, as the poets and the literary folk show us, is exactly what we have to rise to. To those who have adjunct and secondary appointments in the department, thank you. You're doing extra work. To be interdisciplinary just means you work, as Ernst Peppel explained to me in Munich, just means you do all the work in your own field, plus you do work in other fields besides. Otherwise, you know, it doesn't work. So thanks to Sarah, thanks to Dick Boland, who's left, thanks to Peter Whitehouse, who's also gone. I'm all that stands between you and going home. I'll be brief. Thanks to all those people who are making this initiative work. To our juniors, Professor Perel and Professor Popova, let me say I am honored to have an appointment in your department. Okay, now, what have we done? Human beings are nominalists, by which I mean, when a word exists, we tend to imagine that there is an ontological substance behind it. This is part of the power of proper names. I am Mark Turner. I bear almost no relation to the thing that popped out of my mother in 1954, but culture is dedicated, and it invests linguistic resources to convincing all of us that there is a continuity here across these disanalogies and analogies. We have also, okay, I'm Mark Turner, I have an identity. Wow, what a concept, right? There are other concepts we have: time, memory, self, narrative, which have words. And this leads us to think easily that there is a substance behind them. But one of the fundamental products of modern cognitive science and related disciplines is that consciousness is a frail little reed, you're offered trivial folk theories to explain who you are. And they're comprehensively and demonstrably false. There's this thing called vision. 50% of neocortex is implicated in vision. If you ask universally across the world, people will tell you how vision works. It's completely wrong. Almost nobody can tell you how human vision works. It doesn't work at all the way you think it works. The way you perceive color doesn't work the way you think it works. In fact, these little folk theories are sort of, in one sense, maybe offered to us to give us a little bit of security because we can't stand not knowing who we are. But it's certainly true for vision. It's true for standing up. It's true for language. Language demonstrably works in ways that are entirely opposed to folk theoretic notions of how language works. Your concept of self, of time, of memory may be the same thing. So we have this word, but is there such a thing as memory? Stuff happens. There are lots of different processes. Is there such a thing as self? Is there such a thing as time? One of the things that we have seen here, with gratitude to those who have pointed it out to us, is that these simple canonical concepts, part of the job of culture is to deceive us into being secure. That these little canonical concepts may be not one thing, vastly more complicated, all kinds of things going on. So here's the summative part. I would say that one of the things that we've seen here is a lot of spade work on certain kinds of things. The first is why? Why do we have these concepts? This is the evolutionary phylogenetic question. And to us, of course, is what do you mean, why do we have these concepts? How could you not have these concepts? It's like, why do I see that thing as red? Because it's red. Why do I have a concept of self? Because I'm a self, or you're challenging my identity. Why do you think I'm an American? Well, because I'm an American. It's just truth that forces the concept. We just have to let that go because we look at all these other species who don't have these concepts at all or minimally or they're very different and so on. And one of the things we have to recognize is that these notions of self and time and memory are not available to any, at this kind of level, to anything other than the subspecies Homo sapiens sapiens, which means it's weird. And we have to explain it. There's this jump in life. How do we do that? We have to give up the simple notion that these things exist and that we're analyzing them. On the contrary, maybe they're just a mosaic. Maybe there's a lot of stuff that's going on, and we call it memory. And it's very different stuff. Maybe there's no such thing as a memory. So all night long, I've listened to metaphors. You have a memory. You lose it. It goes away. It comes back up. It survives. These are ways of talking that sort of help us think that we know what we're talking about. But in fact, the processes could be completely different. Is there ever, for example, such a thing as a memory? One of the things that we learn from change blindness, from neuronal groups that show that imagination and perception are in fact sharing certain neurobiological pathways, is human memory and human perception are much more constructive than we thought. That doesn't mean they're false and wild and fictional, because maybe the constraints on them are such that you're just driven to construct the same thing again and again and again, so it's somewhat reliable, but they're nonetheless constructive. So maybe there's no such thing as, this is simplistic, a memory. But there are mental operations that produce things that we in our feeble state regard as a memory. Oh, I've got that memory back. Oh, I've recovered that thing that I once lost. All of these are sort of event structure metaphors. You're grasping things, they go away, and so on. So one large question, and we've heard from many, many different people in this room, is the phylogenetic emergence of these concepts that only really arrive for us. It's like Tigger and Winnie the Pooh. By the way, mirrors, you got to see Winnie the Pooh in the Blustery Day and look at what Winnie the Pooh does with a mirror. It's not only bonobos and chimps, it's also Pooh Bears, right? okay, we have these phylogenetic questions. Tigger in Winnie the Pooh says, you know, the wonderful thing about tigers is tigers are lots of fun. We're bouncy, jouncy, flouncy, trouncy, fun, 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 fun. But the most wonderful thing about tigers is I'm the only one. Yes, I'm the only one. Talk about identity. But in fact, human beings for these sorts of things are the only one. And this poses a fundamental cognitive and biological problem because life is not supposed to have these gaps. Okay, that's question one. Question two is how? What is the neurobiological substrate that underpins these kinds of constructions? And here we have learned about a number of different processes: base event, short-term memory, long-term memory, the phonological loop. We have looked at locational methodologies, fMRI from Yana Popova, ERP, EEG. That's another vector that can try to get us onto a royal road where we're looking at what the neurobiological substrate might be of self. So, for example, these claims, when you're remembering a previous event, you're trying actually to recreate in the brain, and as far as our brain imaging techniques can show, a state that was similar to the one in which you were originally situated when you were having that experience. This is, okay, that's the how. The main one that's happened here is, however, the what. That's what's going on when we, for instance, conceive of ourselves, 10 years younger, but we're talking to ourselves. And here we have had a truly masterful conversation. The main voice in the conversation has, of course, been Professor Benson's, who has been, and I really have to express my personal gratitude here, exceptionally daring in not being reductive. So he has asked the question, how does a culturally supplied memory become a personal memory? Now, it's a fundamental cognitive scientific question that I have not seen previously asked in a serious way. And by asked in a serious way, I mean after asking this kind of question, what is going on? We've had many parts of the discourse, the political, the social, the domestic, blending, mental space connections, metaphors. But we're in the presence of somebody who asks how a culturally supplied memory becomes a personal memory, and then lists 14 steps in parallel of mechanisms in the cognitively modern mind that need to be executed and deployed for this to happen. Now, I know that this is not the way you get an NSF grant, but my sense of our cultural position is that we're in a spot something like when alchemy turned into chemistry. That is, there were lots of structural and systematic analyses. There were some goofy things. We don't know quite what they are yet because we won't know for another 20 years. We'll find out. That's the great thing about culture. But where some systematic inquiry is being brought to age-old questions that have been asked for, 2.5 thousand years. They were asked by Aristotle. But now with new kind of parallax coastal navigation, registering different spots on the coast so that we can get different methodologies to try to point in the same direction. And 3.5 years ago, before Merlin was here, before Peo was here, before Faye and Yana and Sarah and Anna were here, before Vera was here, before most of the people in the room, Todd was here. Todd was an anchor, but he was my dissertation student. We wanted to see a spot on Earth where the complexity of human cognition could be addressed with these different methodologies, with these kinds of minds. And I want to express my gratitude to you all for having achieved it, and especially to Professor Benson for having provided the occasion and the insight for these kinds of observations. I'd like to thank Professor Burrows for bringing to the forefront the study of material anchors in human memory and local habitations and a name. Professor Brandt for having contributed to the distinction between the speech act domain and the social domain. All of our students from Cognitive Science 203 and 301 are contributors. 314, that's comparative cognitive. Animal cog, I love it. So thank you to you all for having fulfilled my dream.